Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at this draft paper with, well, a pretty impactful title, The Future of the American Scientific Landscape.
Hmm.
And it's really got me thinking about, all the different things that shape how science gets done, especially that tension between what's really important scientifically
Right.
and the realities of, well, funding and budgets and all that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating problem. And actually this paper kicks off with this
Oh, yeah?
this almost philosophical question by Richard Hamming, who is this brilliant guy at Bell Labs.
Okay.
And he asked, why aren't scientists always working on the most important problems?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like back then at Bell Labs, researchers had so much freedom, it's almost unheard of today.
Yeah.
But the question really sticks with you, especially when you think about how funding really shapes what research actually happens.
It makes you wonder if those days are gone for good,
Hmm.
those golden days at Bell Labs where you could just chase whatever lead, whatever was interesting to you.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if the system itself is kind of pushing us towards specific types of research, maybe at the expense of some other important questions that we could be asking.
Right. And I guess one way to think about that is, the way that research is done in industry versus academia.
Exactly. They have really different logics driving them.
Right. Because a pharmaceutical company, with billions of dollars on the line to develop a new drug,
Right.
they're going to approach research very differently from a university lab that's, exploring the fundamental mysteries of the universe or something.
Exactly. And in industry, especially like pharmaceuticals,
Yeah.
the average cost to bring a new drug to market is something like $2.5 billion.
Wow.
It's huge. So naturally, they're focusing on research with a clear path to making money, often targeting things that affect a lot of people so they can charge a lot for the treatment.
Makes sense from a business perspective, but where does that leave research on rare diseases or
Right.
things where the payoff might be, decades away?
That's a great question. That's where academia usually steps in. Universities and research institutions, they've traditionally been the home for what we call basic research. These are investigations that are driven by pure curiosity and trying to understand the basic principles of how things work.
And we've seen time and time again how important that basic research is. I mean, think about CRISPR. It's revolutionizing gene editing. The potential for treating genetic diseases is
It's
huge,
incredible.
but it all started with researchers looking at how bacteria in yogurt
Right.
defend themselves against viruses. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how research that seems really impractical can lead to groundbreaking discoveries. And CRISPR is not alone. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Barbara McClintock spent decades studying corn genetics.
Okay.
And she faced a ton of skepticism when she first proposed this idea of jumping genes.
Wow. So she's kind of a scientific maverick going against the current and ultimately changing how we understand genetics.
Exactly. And it took time for her work to be accepted widely, just like the research that laid the foundation for CRISPR. And that's because it wasn't driven by an immediate application, but by a desire to just understand these basic mechanisms of how life works. It's a reminder that sometimes the most important problems aren't the ones with the most obvious solutions or the fastest path to commercialization.
It's a good reminder that scientific progress could be really unpredictable. But, if we're patient and we have the support to follow those winding paths, they can lead to incredible places.
Absolutely.
It's like an adventure.
Yeah.
And that's where government funding agencies like the NIH and the NSF, they've played such a crucial role. They've been that bedrock of basic research, giving scientists the resources they need to go on these long and sometimes very unpredictable journeys of discovery.
Right.
Especially the NIH with its huge budget. I mean, they've been behind some of the biggest medical breakthroughs.
Oh, yeah.
From mapping the human genome to all these incredible advances in cancer research and infectious diseases. So, if these agencies are doing so much good, why are we even talking about the challenges facing science funding?
Well, as important as they are facing these mounting pressures. We're seeing proposed budget cuts, frozen funds. There's just a general climate of uncertainty about the future of these institutions, and it's causing a lot of concern in the scientific community.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a little worrisome. I mean, if we're serious about scientific progress, wouldn't cutting funding for these agencies be like shooting ourselves in the foot? Like, what are the consequences if this kind of trend keeps going?
Well, there are a number of potential ramifications. Some people are arguing that we risk stifling innovation, missing out on crucial discoveries that could help us solve some of the biggest challenges facing humanity.
So are we headed for a future where only the research that has this immediate commercial potential, only that gets funded? Is there any hope for those big open-ended questions that might not have like a clear payoff for years, even decades?
It's a serious situation, but I wouldn't say it's all doom and gloom. I mean, there are these new initiatives popping up, like the ARC Institute, which is specifically designed to champion and support fundamental research. but their scale is currently pretty limited compared to what federal agencies can do.
So maybe we need like a multi-pronged approach, a diverse ecosystem of support where the government agencies and these private institutions and philanthropic organizations, they all kind of work together
Yeah.
to make sure we don't miss out on those potentially groundbreaking discoveries, hiding in plain sight.
I think that's a really insightful way to put it. And, beyond just increasing funding, we also need to think about how we can maximize the impact of the research that we're already doing. And this is where the idea of reduce, reuse, recycle comes in for scientific data.
Okay, that's an intriguing concept, but how do you recycle data? Does that mean we're like digging through old research papers hoping to find something useful?
Not quite. It's about making sure that the data from one study can be easily accessed and used for other purposes, which can uncover new insights and maximize the return on that research investment. And that's where data standardization comes in.
Okay, so instead of each research team kind of working in their own little silo with their own data formats,
Right.
we're talking about a more interconnected system where information can flow more freely and be used by lots of different researchers for different reasons.
Exactly. Imagine you have a genomic study that was originally focused on one particular disease. Well, with standardized data, that same set of data could be used to investigate other conditions, to look into the mysteries of aging. You could even explore drug resistance mechanisms.
Hmm.
It's about taking that data and using it for these novel insights, maximizing what we get out of research investment.
That's a really powerful idea, especially when we have limited resources. It's like unlocking all this hidden potential within the data we already have.
Exactly. And this is where the power of modern computational tools comes in.
Oh, okay.
Machine learning algorithms can go through these massive standardized data sets and find those hidden patterns that might be missed with traditional research methods.
Okay.
And that could lead to entirely new avenues of research.
So data standardization, it's not just about making research more efficient. It's also about using those computational tools to reveal insights that might have stayed hidden otherwise.
Exactly. And this combination of standardized data and these powerful tools, it could really speed up scientific discoveries, even if funding's tight.
It sounds like we're kind of on the edge of this new era of scientific exploration where collaboration and data sharing are becoming just as important as the experiments themselves.
Hmm.
This raises a lot of questions about how we can best navigate, this changing world of science.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Navigating the future of American science is going to require a delicate balancing act, weighing funding realities with the pursuit of really essential research. And the choices we make today, they're going to have a huge impact on scientific progress, not just in the U.S., but around the world.
It really feels like we're at this turning point, doesn't it? We've talked about the challenges, but what can we actually do, to make sure American science keeps thriving? What are some concrete things we can do to address those funding worries and build a more supportive environment for research?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, but the paper does give us a few potential solutions. One of the key recommendations is to think about diversifying funding models.
So moving beyond just relying on government agencies or
Right.
hoping that some rich benefactor is going to come in and save the day.
Exactly. We need a more well-rounded approach, exploring these models that can bridge the gap between, what's scientifically important and what's commercially viable. It's about supporting that research that might not have those immediate applications, but could lead to some really big breakthroughs down the line.
This makes me think about the difference between research that's aimed at developing a specific product or therapy
Right.
versus research that's exploring just the fundamental workings of a cell or a galaxy. Like, both are important, but the timelines and the potential outcomes are so different.
Exactly. And that's where these blended funding models can be really effective. You could have early stage research that has a high degree of uncertainty,
Okay.
but also, high potential impact. And that could be funded primarily by government agencies like the NIH or the NSF.
So they provide that initial spark, to get things going. But then how do we make sure that research with commercial potential doesn't get lost in the shuffle?
That's where these partnerships with industry are super important. So as the research moves forward and starts showing promise, for real-world applications,
Uh-huh.
there could be mechanisms to transition over to private investment.
So it's like building this pipeline where government funding provides that early support
Right.
for that high-risk, high-reward research. And then as those projects develop and show commercial potential, they can attract those investments from companies that can then help bring those discoveries to the market.
Exactly. It's about making the funding system more fluid and dynamic, nurturing scientific discovery from its very early stages all the way to those practical applications that we see in the real world.
Makes a lot of sense. Are there other ways that we can encourage this kind of collaboration between academia and industry? I mean, I imagine there were some cultural differences and even some skepticism on both sides.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Bridging that gap between academia and industry, it requires more than just, funding mechanisms. You need to build trust.
Right.
You need to have open communication, and you need to recognize that both sides bring something valuable to the table, their own expertise, their own perspectives.
So how do we actually encourage these partnerships? I mean, it's not like scientists and CEOs are just, hanging out, chatting, and swapping ideas at the water cooler.
Well, targeted initiatives and policy changes can play a big role. Governments could create grant programs that are specifically designed to support those collaborative projects
Okay.
between universities and companies.
So creating these incentives and opportunities for researchers and companies to work together towards those common goals.
Exactly. And it's not always about direct funding. You could have tax incentives for companies that invest in university research
Mhm.
or policies that promote sharing data and intellectual property
Okay.
that can also encourage these partnerships to form.
So it's about sending that message that these collaborations are a national priority, not just something that's left to, chance encounters at a conference or something.
Exactly. And beyond the practical things, there's also that cultural element that we need to address. We need people to have a better understanding of the different motivations and the different priorities that drive research in academia and in industry.
Because at the end of the day, they're both working towards the same goal, right? To advance knowledge, to solve these real-world problems.
Absolutely. If we can break down some of those perceived barriers and foster a more collaborative environment,
Right.
I think we can really create fertile ground for innovation and discovery.
So far, we've been talking a lot about, funding models and collaboration, but I remember you mentioned this idea of recycling data and data standardization. So where does that fit into this big picture of securing the future of American science?
Data standardization is all about maximizing the impact of the research that we're already doing. It's a way to amplify the value of existing data, to uncover insights that might otherwise remain hidden. Think about it. Every single scientific study generates this treasure trove of data. But all too often that data is it's locked away in the individual labs. It's formatted in different ways, and it's really hard for other people to access it.
It's like having this library full of books,
Right.
but they're all in different languages, and there's no system for cataloging them or translating them.
Exactly. Data standardization is about creating a common language for that scientific data, making it easier to share, to reuse, and to analyze across all these different studies and different disciplines.
So it's not just about collecting more data.
Right.
It's about making the data that we already have more valuable, more useful.
Precisely. Imagine if researchers could easily access and analyze data from thousands of studies on a particular topic, no matter where or when those studies were done. That's the power of data standardization.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how powerful this could be, but how do we actually make it happen? I mean, we can't just tell scientists to all use the same, spreadsheet program.
It's definitely more nuanced than that, but you're thinking along the right lines. We need to establish some clear standards and protocols
Okay.
for how data is collected, how it's stored, how it's shared, and just as importantly, we need to give researchers incentives to actually adopt those standards.
So like making it a requirement to get grants from funding agencies or a requirement to publish in scientific journals.
Those are definitely effective strategies. It's about creating a culture where data standardization is just seen as an essential part of the scientific process, not just this optional extra.
This isn't just about making things easier for researchers, is it? I mean, there are real-world benefits to this kind of approach, right?
Absolutely. Data standardization can really speed up discoveries, and that could lead to new treatments for diseases, new solutions for environmental challenges, all these innovations that improve our lives.
It's amazing to think that something as kind of, basic as just standardizing data formats
Right.
could have such a huge impact on scientific progress.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most impactful solutions are the ones that deal with that underlying infrastructure and those processes that underpin all that scientific research.
This brings up another question, what about privacy? If we're making data more widely available,
Right.
how do we protect sensitive information?
That's a crucial point. Data standardization doesn't mean that we just, throw privacy out the window. It's about finding ways to share that data responsibly, using techniques like de-identification and access controls to protect that sensitive information.
So it's a balancing act. We want to make the data more open, more accessible,
Right.
But we also need to protect privacy and make sure that the data is used ethically.
Exactly. As we move into this new era of data-driven science,
Right.
these conversations about ethics and responsibility, they need to be front and center.
Yeah, this is a lot to think about, New funding models, more collaboration, data standardization, ethical considerations. It seems like the future of American science is going to require some really bold thinking and a willingness to try new things.
It definitely will. And that's where the public comes in. It's not just up to scientists and policymakers to shape the future of science. It's up to all of us.
So what can we do, as individuals to contribute to this scientific revolution? Do we all need to become data analysts or start investing in biotech startups or something?
Not necessarily. There are lots of ways to support science, even if you're not a scientist.
Okay, like what? Give us some concrete examples. How can we, as everyday citizens, make a difference?
First and foremost, stay informed. Read about scientific discoveries, get involved in discussions about science policy, support organizations that advocate for science funding.
So be an informed citizen and use our voices to advocate for science.
Exactly. You can also support science education in your community, volunteer at a local science museum, mentor a student who's interested in STEM fields, donate to organizations that promote science literacy.
It's like we can all be ambassadors for science, spreading the word and inspiring the next generation of scientists.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of just being curious. Ask questions, explore new ideas. Don't be afraid to dive into scientific topics that really fascinate you.
Embrace that inner science geek.
Exactly. Curiosity, it's the engine of scientific progress. The more we ask, the more we discover. And it's that spirit of inquiry that really moves us forward as a society.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's clear that American science is at a crossroads, but it's also a really exciting time to be part of this conversation. We have this incredible opportunity to help shape the future of scientific discovery, and that's a responsibility we shouldn't take lightly.
I completely agree. The challenges are real, but so are the opportunities. And if we all work together and we share this commitment to supporting science, I think we can overcome those challenges and create a brighter future, a future that's driven by knowledge and innovation.
Wow, we've really covered a lot, haven't we? From those big philosophical questions about what problems scientists should even be working on to those very practical realities of funding and collaboration and all that.
Yeah, we have. We've really explored, the challenges and the possibilities for American science. But I think as we start to wrap things up here, I want to emphasize that the future isn't set in stone. There's this incredible resilience and ingenuity in the scientific community. It's a deep belief in the power of discovery, and that gives me a lot of hope for what's ahead.
Like scientists are these eternal optimists,
Mm.
always pushing the boundaries, looking for those answers, even when it seems like the odds are stacked against them.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And think back to those success stories we talked about earlier, CRISPR, jumping genes, the mRNA vaccines. None of those happened overnight. They were the result of decades of dedicated research, often on the face of, skepticism and very limited resources.
It really shows you how dedicated scientists are to pursuing knowledge, even when the path is unclear and the payoff might be years or even decades away.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really key takeaway from this deep dive, I think. It's not just about getting more money for science, although that's obviously important. It's about creating a culture that values scientific inquiry, long-term thinking and a willingness to take risks.
So it's not just supporting the research that has this clear path to a product or profit. It's also about recognizing that some of the most transformative discoveries, they come from unexpected places. Research that might seem impractical at first or even a little whimsical.
Exactly. And that's a message that we need to get across to policymakers and to business leaders and to the public. Supporting science isn't just about funding a specific project. It's about investing in a future where curiosity-driven research can thrive, where exploration of the unknown is encouraged, and we celebrate the power of human ingenuity to solve these complex challenges.
It's about making space for those moments, the ones that can change the course of history.
Yeah, beautifully said. And speaking of those moments, what really stood out to you during our look at the future of the American scientific landscape?
What really struck me was the interconnectedness of it all. We often think about science as happening in these isolated labs, but But really, it's a very collaborative and interconnected effort. From the funding models to the data sharing to the cultural changes needed to break down the walls between academia and industry, it's clear that progress depends on this really complex network of support.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that brings me to another really important point, which is the role of the individual scientist, navigating this really intricate system. So if you were to give advice to a young researcher just starting out today, what would you tell them?
Oh gosh, well, first and foremost, I'd say, follow your passion. It's a tough field. It's filled with setbacks and rejections and moments of self-doubt. But if you're truly excited about the research that you're doing, that passion is going to carry you through those difficult times.
I think that's excellent advice. Don't just chase the hot topic or the latest trend. Find a research question that truly captures your imagination, something that keeps you, up at night wondering, what if?
And don't be afraid to think big. Challenge the status quo, ask those unusual questions, and don't shy away from research that might seem, a little risky or a little out there.
Yes, embrace that scientific rebel spirit, just like Barbara McClintock did with her jumping gins. Remember, those groundbreaking discoveries, they often come from the people who dare to go beyond those well-worn paths.
It's about having the courage to explore that uncharted territory, to follow those intriguing leads, even if you're not sure where they might lead you.
Exactly. And never forget that science is at its core a collaborative endeavor. Seek out mentors, build relationships with colleagues, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Some of the most impactful discoveries come from teams of researchers who are working together, sharing their ideas and challenging each other's perspective.
It's like that old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Right. And finally, never lose sight of the big picture. Science, it's about more than just, publishing papers or getting grants. It's about expanding our understanding of the world, solving real world problems, and ultimately making people's lives better, keeping that sense of purpose at the center of your work that's going to guide you through those challenges and through the rewards of a scientific career.
That's a perfect way to end things, I think. This has been such a fascinating deep dive, exploring both the complexities and the incredible potential of American science.
It really has. And as we conclude our exploration of the future of the American scientific landscape, I'll leave you with one final thought-provoking question. What role will you play in shaping the future of scientific discovery?
That's a question worth thinking about, isn't it? Because ultimately, the future of science, it's in all our hands. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep believing in the power of science to change the world. The